Hey, what's up studs? Ryan here, or MandRproductions, and today I'm reviewing the 1999 LEGO Star Wars TIE Fighter and Y-Wing set. This version in particular, set 7150, but this was actually re-released twice in following years, both in 2002 and 2005, so we did see this a couple more times, which was kind of interesting. It's one of the few times LEGO has done this with LEGO Star Wars and just straight up re-released a set instead of remade it, so that was very interesting, although there are some small changes from set to set. This is basically the same thing you would see from set to set. Anyway, it's recommended for ages 8 to 12, includes 407 pieces. You get 3 minifigs. You have a Darth Vader character there. You got a Y-Wing pilot, and you're going to get an R4 unit as well. Of note, in the actual set, the R4 unit on the box art is facing backwards. I just find that kind of funny. That's not something they would do modern day. And you can see this is running through the Death Star trench, which is pretty neat. Despite the price tag of $38, this set retailed for $50 when it was released. And accounting for inflation, you're looking at about $75 in today's money. If you wanted to buy this set on eBay, it would set you back, at least sealed, anywhere in between $110 and $150. So definitely can get quite expensive if you do want one of these today sealed in the box. But hey, it might be worth it for you. It's a pretty neat original set, the first ever Y-Wing and TIE Fighter created. So on the backside, you'll see them kind of dismantled with the figures just kind of hanging out around the wreckage more or less. And then you'll see some alternate builds there off to the right, which is something really cool that LEGO used to do, but they unfortunately do not do anymore. But they definitely gave you some inspiration in case you did want to build them into something else. It's just not quite what LEGO Star Wars is about anymore, and I'm actually okay with that. It's just one of the bygone eras of LEGO Star Wars. But let's go ahead and take a look at our minifigures included in the set. Is the OG Darth Vader minifigure, obviously hailing from 1999, so you're going to see that it is much different than what we see today from LEGO Star Wars. Perhaps the most jarring of which is the lack of printing. It's just such a simple, bare bones print compared to what we see today. I think the dumbed down print is more jarring than the changed helmet design. They did change the helmet a few years back, and it, I think, looks better now that it's kind of grown on me. But this OG one will always be the original and always have that special place in my heart. It's got the original LEGO cape material there, a little bit tougher than what we see today, which is a little bit more malleable, a little softer cape, which bends a little bit easier when you want to put them in cockpits, which I really like compared to the older ones here. Does have the chrome lightsaber hilt, which is an awesome inclusion. Of course, the red lightsaber blade for Darth Vader. And of course, removing the helmet, you're going to find Darth Vader's face. It's Anakin Skywalker. Very ugly face, but they used that for about 10 years before they finally did change that face up quite a bit recently. So really like that. 1999 Darth Vader, not too bad, just very dumbed down from what we see today. Next up is Dutch Vander, who is an awesome-looking Rebel pilot character. Actually has a really detailed face print with the little microphone hanging down from his helmet onto his face there. Really cool. Great job by LEGO back in 1999 with that. There's actually a little bit more off to the side there, more detail, kind of like the earpiece, I believe that would be, where you can hear what's coming in from the microphone. They even have a little bit of his hair showing through, which is pretty neat, but that's usually covered up most of the time with the helmet. You're not going to be able to see that coming down, unfortunately. It does have the matching eyebrows there, which actually look like they're a little offset from the eyes. Kind of interesting. And then you'll see the helmet print, very detailed for the time as well. 1999 helmet prints usually weren't this detailed, like the Luke Skywalker helmet just wasn't that detailed, but this one had a ton of printing on it. So LEGO did a great job with that. No back print or anything, obviously very simple character for the time, but still very nice. It kind of holds up to today's standards somehow, even though it doesn't have that dual molded helmet that LEGO decided to put in, but has recently gotten rid of again, I believe. Helmets pretty much haven't changed in 20 years, so it actually does hold up quite nicely to time, except for the torso and leg print. Those are obviously just not there. And finally, we have R4-D5 here, who is a simplistic astromech droid by today's standards. His dome print does not come down to the bottom of the dome. It's only like the top half of the dome, which looks really bad. Like, it didn't look bad back in the day because it's all we had, but now that they can actually print on the rest of it, this looks awful. It just looks so weird. The torso print actually ain't that bad, and it's the same old astromech droid pieces that we've had for the last 20 years, so LEGO actually hasn't changed this design much other than the printing on these characters. So it is actually quite weird to see this and just be like, well, this hasn't changed in 20 years, so maybe soon LEGO will change this up. But just like R2-D2, it's like the same exact print, but in a different color. You can see that, very similar prints, just in different colors. So R4-D5 from the Y-Wing. So as you know, this set does include two vehicles, the TIE Fighter and the Y-Wing. We'll take a look at Darth Vader's TIE Fighter first. I find this to be a very interesting model. It was the first of its kind, obviously, coming out in 1999. And there are some things about it that hold up to today, and there are some things about it that I really don't like nowadays. I think are just abysmal. So we'll start off with what I think is probably the worst design aspect of this set, and it really only missed this by a few years. But on the top, you know how they use the TIE Fighter piece that's kind of a round dome piece? They didn't have that in 1999, and this just looks awful. The top side of this just does not look good. It's very squared off, very blocky, which I guess that's kind of the aesthetic of a lot of these early Lego Star Wars sets, but this really kills it for me for this particular model, especially because like a few years later they come out with one and it's got the dome piece on it. It's like, well, they could have just waited, but no. Or they could have come up with it earlier, but no. This just doesn't look great. It is printed though, so thumbs up for the printing. We do have the classic TIE Fighter cockpit piece on here, which is printed as well. Looks absolutely gorgeous. One of those pieces that really worked out really well for Lego Star Wars in the early years. You'll see the side. We have another Imperial insignia. Not a ton of detail on the side of these wings either. They really left a lot open to your imagination on this first edition of Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, but I guess it looks good enough. Another one of my least favorite parts about this design is how you get into the cockpit. In the current models, you would just pull the whole assembly up from here. Now, or at least in 1999 rather, you would just open the top part, and that's how you get to the interior. And that is awful. Like, that is not ideal at all. So if you want to put a character in there, Darth Vader namely, you're going to have to really squeeze him in there from the top down, and that's just not fun. It just isn't fun. And like, I don't even understand how he's supposed to fit in there with his cape, because you can see, as we try to put him in, like, where does this cape go? This is not a fun way to do. It's terrible. Okay, I don't know how else to put it. It's just the worst thing I've seen on a Lego Star Wars TIE Fighter, I think. I'm sure I've said bad things about TIE Fighters before, but this one has a terribly designed cockpit, especially given that Darth Vader has a cape that is not easily bendable, and then you probably end up with something like this most of the time, especially if you bought this for a kid back in the day and they were trying to play with it. I don't know how you were supposed to actually put Darth Vader in there unless you took his cape off, because it just doesn't work very well. The other thing you'll notice is that the wings are kind of floppy. The connections aren't perfectly strong. Like, it's just not as good as today's models, so that is another downfall of these early models. And also, this little fin on the back essentially is a nice place to hold it, but again, kind of shaky. Can see, but yeah, that's pretty much Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. Biggest design flaw is going to be the cockpit. The rest of it's pretty much par for the course for 1999 for Lego Star Wars sets. Let's bring over the Y-Wing, which is actually one of my favorite classic Lego Star Wars designs from the era. I think this one is actually really good. It was really hard for Lego to mess up versus this, where the cockpit's just terrible. This they actually did a great job with, so I guess we'll start out with the easiest feature, and that's just plopping R4 down into his little spot there. There's a couple of studs for him to grab onto down there, so even if you flip this over, he ain't going anywhere. So that's pretty great. And we'll go ahead and pull back out here, and we can see the front end of the Y-Wing has a printed cockpit piece. Again, a lot of printed stuff back in 1999, so that was great. We could open this up, and you'll find that there are some studs for your pilot to sit on, as well as a couple of antenna pieces. And then there's actually a little printed piece in there, which I'll show you in a second, but you're going to drop him down in here, and then he actually is going to lay back a little bit just so that the cockpit can close on down on top of him. But there's the trench run printed piece there, which actually looks pretty great, very nice for the time. So gave you a nice view of what the Y-Wing pilot was going to see on his instruments inside the cockpit. We'll close that up. Nice shaping on the front of the Y-Wing, as good as I think I could get for 1999. I give him props for that. Actually looks quite good. Nice little bit of yellow accent there. We have the blasters in the front here. No flick fire, spring-loaded stud shooters or anything like that. Underneath, you'll just find it's kind of a blank slate with some landing gear here, which we'll get to again in a minute. We do have this turret on the top, which I really love. I think it's such a simple design, but that's so fun about it. It's not going to break on you, and if it does, it'll break like that, and you just plop it back on. But it's pretty well on there when you have it on there like that. So it's not going anywhere. You can spin it around very easily, and it's a lot of fun, honestly. I really like this particular feature. So when you would fly it around, or at least when I was younger, and I would play with, I had the 2005 version of this set, actually, and I would pretty much the same thing. You know, you'd fly around and you go pew, 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 and you'd shoot stuff behind you, and that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this particular turret on this Y-Wing design for some reason. Also there in the midsection, kind of the neck area essentially of the Y-Wing, you have a couple of pieces holding down a little box here, and it's actually another printed piece. Looks beautiful there. And if we pull this box out, it's a little tight in there, but that's probably for the best, because you don't want it to, there we go, don't want it to just fall out during flight. pull out the box. You're not going to find anything in it, unfortunately, but you can, of course, put things in it if you do want to. But again, blank inside. Very nice print. Really like that piece. And we'll see something kind of similar here, moving our way back into the main body of the YWing with a couple of printed 2x2 pieces. We actually saw these for quite a few years in quite a few different sets from the Rebel Alliance for LEGO Star Wars, but we see both of these pieces on either side, just adding quite a bit of detail to the midsection of the YWing, which was otherwise just kind of covered in studs, just not very detailed like they do today. Just such a simple design. You can open up this back section, and this is a place where you can put like Darth Vader's lightsaber or maybe a weapon for your Rebel pilot if you wanted to. It's just like a nice storage spot that exists, but obviously nothing really came to put in there. Just something you could use at your own leisure. And then the engines of this YWing are absolutely beautiful. Such a simple design, but so effective. It really matched the rest of the YWing's design so well. I particularly love the half golf ball dome pieces that they put on the top of the engines here, and it just worked so well. And these totally look like golf balls, right? If you hold this like this and I told you it was a golf ball, you probably believe it was a golf ball until I did this, right? It's just such an interesting piece, and I'm so glad they were able to find a use for it on the YWing here. I think it just worked so well with this YWing. But the landing gear on the bottom is so sturdy. It's just so stupid simple. I really like the landing gear. Just done. Like, so easy to use, and it's just not even noticeable when you're flying it around, to be honest. If you want to pick it up, you just pick it up. Like, this set's not going to fall apart. It's held together by Technic here on the sides. Like, this thing is going nowhere. Very, very strong model. A lot less flimsy feeling than the Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, I feel like. So when I shake that, you can hear a lot kind of shaking around, versus when I shake this, not really a lot going on. Maybe if I even hold down the obvious should be loose bits. There's no real rattle from anywhere else on the YWing versus Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, which is just a rattle machine. So I would say the biggest flaw for Darth Vader's TIE Fighter is the cockpit, and I don't really know what the biggest flaw on the YWing is. Maybe just the fact that it doesn't have any like bombing feature. I think that was such a core part of what the YWing is, that it's kind of sad that you can't drop bombs out of the bottom of it. They kind of opted with the storage space that now in current YWings they use for a bombing feature. So just kind of an interesting note there, just something that they really missed out on a potential feature for. But pretty nice little sets here for the TIE Fighter and YWing from 1999. I'm going to go with a 7.5 out of 10 on these. This is worth 5 points, and this is worth 2.5 points. This Darth Vader's TIE Fighter is an absolute abomination. They did refine this kind of design over the next few iterations with this particular design of Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, but really the 2009 one was where they hit their stride with Darth Vader TIE Fighter models. And obviously the blue color of the TIE Fighter throws a lot of people off. That's something that LEGO did with those early TIE Fighter models until they started using the gray color in future TIE Fighter models. So kind of an interesting note there with the Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, just something that a lot of the early TIE Fighters were blue and just kind of threw a lot of people off, myself included. Didn't love that, but I also can understand that if you did it in the old light gray, it would probably look terrible. So the blue was just something nostalgic, and I actually really appreciate that they used blue in the early days because it kind of helps separate eras of LEGO Star Wars, and that's just one of those things. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this set down in the comment section below. I would probably recommend against buying it unless you have some sentimental attachment to it. I don't think it's that great of a set. I think you can get better Darth Vader TIE Fighters and YWings. It's just not that great of a set. Unless you really want the classic YWing, I don't think this Darth Vader's TIE Fighter is particularly enticing. The YWing maybe. But even if you want this YWing, I would really recommend you get the later version of the set because it comes in the new gray color and you get a more refined Darth Vader's TIE Fighter model. Not a perfect one, but more refined than this. So that's where I land on this set. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Thank you all for watching, and check out my other 1999 LEGO Star Wars set reviews on the end screen now. Peace out.